Crappie, one of America's favorite freshwater game fish. Surely the most favorite panfish. Crappie are a fish for anglers of all ages and abilities. A hard-fighting, good-to-eat species that anyone can learn to catch. Hello, I'm Ken Schultz, fishing editor for Field & Stream magazine. Welcome to the 3M Field & Stream video library presentation, Formula for Success, Crappie. This is a different kind of program than most fishing videos. The people you'll see catching crappies are everyday anglers like yourself. That's appropriate, because you don't have to be an expert angler to catch crappies. However, you can catch more crappies and have more consistent success if you know some basic facts and techniques. By watching this videotape, you'll learn about crappie and how to fish for crappie in natural lakes and in reservoirs. You'll learn how to find crappie hotspots in both spring and summer. And you'll see the equipment and techniques used to catch crappies in a wide range of conditions. Perhaps most importantly, you'll learn that there is a formula for fishing success. A formula you can use to catch crappies and any other kind of game fish. In fact, this videotape can put you on the path to becoming a better, all-around angler. Now, let's go catch some crappies.
Most anglers feel that spring is the easiest and most enjoyable time to go crappie fishing. But to consistently catch crappies in the spring, you've got to put together three important factors: location, behavior, and presentation. To find crappies, you've got to know where to look for them. You'll find crappies only in very specific locations, which vary from season to season. To catch crappies, you've got to understand their behavior. That means knowing what they eat and how they respond to weather changes and light levels. Presentation is the lure or bait you use. Your presentation has to match the crappie's location and behavior. Location plus behavior plus presentation. It's like a formula. Put them all together, and you're going to be a successful crappie angler. Now, let's say you're getting ready for that first big fishing trip of the year. How are you going to use that formula for success? First of all, remember that crappies don't look at our human calendar. Spring crappie fishing begins when the waters in your area start warming up from the coldest winter temperatures. In the South, crappie fishing often begins in late February or early March. Northern crappies move into their springtime locations in April or May. Across the country, crappies go by dozens of different names: calico bass, goggle-eye perch, roach, silver sides, strawberry perch, and many others. But basically, there are two species of crappie: black crappies and white crappies. Black crappies are more common in natural lakes, where the water is relatively clear and still. White crappies are predominant in rivers and reservoirs, where the water is turbid or stained, and where there may be a slight current. No matter what you like to call them, you can use the same formula for success to catch them: location plus behavior plus presentation. And in the spring, find the right location by checking with bait and tackle shops. Ask for the latest word on where the crappies are biting. Some bodies of water will warm up faster than others and, consequently, have better crappie action. If possible, get a hydrographic map of the body of water you want to fish. A hydrographic map shows you the depth levels in a body of water. A good map also calls out underwater features that attract and hold fish. In general, crappies will be in shallow water, less than 8 to 10 feet deep, in locations that are protected from the wind. Those are the places that warm up first in a lake. Shallow channels and canals will be the first locations to warm up in the spring. Shallow bays are crappie hotspots, especially if the bottom is dark with old, decaying vegetation. The dark bottom absorbs the sun's energy and warms the water. Creek inlets are good locations for springtime crappies. So are reed beds and areas of flooded timber. Now, how are the crappies behaving in those locations? The crappies have moved into warm, shallow water because that's where their food is. Crappies eat small fish like minnows and threadfin or gizzard shad, insects, worms, and small crustaceans. Weather conditions can affect how actively crappies feed. Warm, stable weather draws crappies into shallow water, where they feed actively. Weather changes, like a cold front that follows a storm, can push the crappies into deeper water and make them less active. Light levels affect crappie behavior too. In the morning, when light levels are low, crappies often feed more actively. As the sun rises and light levels increase, the crappies may become less active. In the afternoon and evening, when light levels are lower, crappie activity often picks up again. One of the nice things about crappie fishing is that you don't need a lot of equipment. For example, you can catch crappies from shore, especially in the spring. But with a boat and motor, you can get into a lot of good spots you simply can't reach from the shore. For tackle, all you need is a few basic items. Many anglers like to use a lightweight spin cast rod. A spinning rod and reel is another good choice for crappie fishing. Pick a rod that matches the locations you fish. A shorter 5 to 5.5 foot rod is good for casting in and around cover. A longer 6 to 6.5 foot rod is good for casting a light lure longer distances. You can use longer rods, 10 to 14 feet long, to dip your lure in and around cover. When fishing in clear water, use 2 to 4 pound test lines so the crappies have a harder time seeing your line. In dark, stained water, you can use heavier 6 to 8 pound test line. Heavier line will often let you pull your lure out of brush and snags. You should use as thin and lightweight a line as possible. A thin, flexible line gives your lure a more natural, lifelike action in the water. Jigs are one of the most commonly used lures for crappies. You should have an assortment of jigs in different colors, such as pink, white, yellow, blue, and black. The jig should be in a range of sizes, from 1/8 ounce down to 1/64 ounce, with most of them in the 1/16 and 1/32 ounce sizes. Have a variety of styles, jigs with plastic bodies, tails of marabou, which is a kind of feather, jigs with spinners, even plain jigs you can tip with a minnow. Many other lures will catch crappies too, including spinners and small sinking crankbaits. In some cases, you'll want to use live bait, so get a variety of hooks, split shot sinkers, small bobbers, and a minnow bucket. When you head out in hot pursuit of those crappies, remember that each passenger in the boat must have a life jacket. Wear your life jacket, especially when running the boat from one location to another. When you get to a good spot, don't go blasting in at full speed. Too much noise can spook the crappies and make them hard to catch. Just drift in, or use your electric trolling motor. Sunglasses will protect your eyes. Polarized sunglasses will also reduce glare off the water's surface and help you see objects below the surface, like weeds, brush, and logs. Those objects might attract and hold crappies. When you're fishing for crappies, each angler should be using a different kind of lure. Give the crappies a choice and let them tell you what they want to bite. A small jig, 1/16 or 1/32 ounce, is a good presentation to begin with. Pink and white or yellow are good colors. Use an improved clinch knot to tie on your jig. Here's how to tie an improved clinch knot. Thread a few inches of line through the hook eye. Twist the hook 5 turns. Thread the end of the line through the loop next to the hook eye. Don't put the line through the hook eye. Pull the end of the line back through the second loop you just made. Pull firmly but smoothly on the line to snug up the knot. An improved clinch knot is one of the best knots for tying on jigs, lures, or plain hooks. Before pulling the knot tight, you should wet the line. That reduces friction and prevents the knot from weakening. You can fish for crappies without a bobber or cork, but a bobber will help you match the behavior of the fish. If your bobber has a spring-loaded clip, here's a good way to put it on. Make a loop in your line where you want the bobber, 2 to 3 feet above your lure. Put the clip over the looped line. Then pull the loop over the bobber and pull the line tight. This keeps the bobber from moving down the line when you cast. Remember, in most springtime conditions, crappies rarely chase after fast-moving lures. The bobber keeps your lure or bait suspended right at the feeding level of the fish. You may need to move the bobber up or down, depending on how deep the water is and at what depth the crappies are feeding. When you cast, pick a target. Put your jig where the crappies are, close to objects in the water, like those reeds. If there are any crappies in the location, you'll soon find out. When water temperatures reach the mid to upper 60s, crappies will begin spawning in shallow water. Spawning crappies are often very aggressive and easy to catch. Look for spawning areas around reed beds, bays with sand or gravel bottoms, and flooded timber. Look at the beautiful dark color of that crappie. It's a male that has moved into shallow water to spawn. A big bass on a crappie jig? It could happen to you. Bass, sunfish, and other game fish will often be moving into warm, shallow water along with the crappies. Catching other fish adds to the excitement of the sport, but not all game fish may be in season yet. Check your local fishing regulations so that you know which fish you can keep and which ones you have to release. Crappies are relatively easy to catch in the spring, but by paying close attention to your presentation techniques, you'll catch more crappies more consistently. Let's go through your presentation step by step. After you cast, let the lure and bobber sit still for a bit. Start retrieving slowly, just a foot or so at a time. Pause briefly, then retrieve a little more. Keep the line as straight as possible between the tip of your rod and the bobber. That's called keeping the slack out of your line. A lot of times, a crappie will strike just as you stop your retrieve, and you want to be ready to set the hook. Here's what your jig should be doing. Reeling in the bobber pulls the jig up and forward a little, a movement that imitates a minnow. The bobber moves up and down with ripples and waves, adding more action to the jig. Concentrate on that bobber. Lack of attention is the main reason for missing fish. Notice how the bobber goes down, but the angler misses the fish because he didn't set the hook soon enough. With most baits and lures, you need to set the hook the instant you see the bobber move off to the side or down. If you hesitate, you give the crappie a chance to spit out the hook. After you've reeled in your jig, pick another target, cast, and retrieve slowly. Fish the jig all the way back to the boat. Sometimes a crappie will follow the jig for a while before striking. Keep the slack out of your line between the rod tip and the bobber. Watch that bobber. When you set the hook, sweep the rod up quickly and smoothly. A quick, smooth motion sets the hook without ripping it out of the crappie's paper-thin mouth. Bring the fish in with a smooth retrieve. Keep the rod tip up to put constant tension on the fish. A little slack line might let the crappie flip off. You can lift smaller crappies right into the boat, but you may want to net a big fish. Or you can grab the crappie's lower jaw to land the fish. Crappies don't have sharp teeth, but watch out for the hook. Crappies are an abundant fish in most waters, so it's okay to keep some to eat. But many states are adopting size restrictions and daily limits on crappies to protect and improve the fish population. So learn how to carefully catch and release crappies. If you're going to release a fish, keep it in the water as much as possible. Wet your hand before grasping the fish. Hold the fish gently and remove the hook as quickly quickly as possible. Support the fish in the water and let it swim away by itself. We've shown you how the formula for success works in one kind of spring fishing situation: natural lakes with shallow bays and newly emerging weeds. Next, we'll show you how to use the same formula in another common location: flooded timber. Flooded timber is another great spring location for crappie fishing. In some reservoirs, flooded timber creates thousands of acres of prime crappie fishing water. But flooded timber can also include a single tree that has fallen from the shore of a natural lake. The point is, wherever you find any trees or brush in the water, concentrate on that location. You'll probably find some crappies. Quietly move your boat right into the trees. To fish this kind of location, you can use the same basic presentation we showed you in the first part of this program: a small jig suspended below a bobber. The bobber lets you move the jig slowly through the water, giving crappies time to see it and react to the jig. The bobber floats your jig over the branches and brush that can snag your jig. Fishing in cover like this takes good casting skills. You can make your cast more accurate by using the tip of your finger to control the line as it goes out. Cast the jig toward your target. Use finger pressure to slow the jig down and make it drop right on target. With a little practice, you'll be using this technique to put your jig right next to cover, right where the crappies are. Now, what do you do when the action stops? What options do you have when you aren't catching any fish? You can't expect to catch fish all the time, but you can catch more fish more consistently if you follow a strategy. If you're not having any success, do something different, but do it with a plan in mind. The first step in your plan should be to make some minor adjustments in your presentation. The crappies may not be attracted to the lure you've selected or the way you're fishing it. Always make the easy changes first. Simply try speeding up your retrieve or slowing it down. Use your rod to give the jig a little more action sometimes. Fish your lure or bait at different depths. If those simple changes don't produce results, try a different lure. Go from a larger jig to a smaller jig. Try different color combinations. Switch to a different style jig. Live bait is another presentation that often works when lures and jigs are not productive. A live bait rig can be as simple as a hook and a small split-shot sinker suspended below a bobber. Hook your live bait so it stays alive. With a minnow, for example, hook it through the mouth, through the eyes, or through the tail. If changing your presentation doesn't work, make some adjustments in your location. Keep moving around in the general location. One particular spot could be holding many of the fish in that area. Finally, when you do catch fish, pay attention to what you did to get a strike. How deep was the jig? How fast were you moving the lure? Did the crappie hit when you were right next to cover or a ways out from cover? Remember, fish follow patterns. If you figure out the pattern, you're going to catch more fish. You can't tell the fish how to behave, but you can let them tell you how they are behaving. That's the way to catch fish consistently and have a lot more fun. Let's say you're not having any success at one location. Then it's time to try another area. When you move from one location to another, always remember to clip on the emergency cutoff tether. The emergency cutoff is a safety feature that automatically shuts off the motor if you're accidentally thrown overboard. When you fish flooded timber in the spring, you may want to use a longer rod and no bobber. A long rod lets you just reach over and drop the jig right next to cover. Let the jig drop down a couple of feet. Hold the jig at that level. Give it a little jigging motion up and down. Watch for any line movement. You may feel a slight tap through your rod. If you want to catch crappies in flooded timber, you usually have to put your lure right down into the branches. And you're probably going to get hung up every now and then. If you're using a jig with a light wire hook, you can sometimes pull the jig free by straightening the hook. Sometimes you can slide the rod tip down the line and carefully push the jig off. But you probably are going to lose some jigs. Before you tie on a new jig, cut off a foot or two of line. That will remove any damaged or weakened line. Birds and fish can get tangled up and die in old monofilament line. So, coil up any discarded line and make sure it doesn't wind up in the lake or on the shore. Let's briefly go over that formula for success again. First, location. In early spring, shallow shoreline areas are the first parts of a lake to warm up. Crappies move into those locations, at first to feed and later to spawn. Second, behavior. Crappies are eating small fish and other aquatic animals. Warm, stable weather makes them more active. Cold fronts and falling temperatures make the crappies less active. Third, presentation. You can use many types of lures and baits to catch crappies, but one of the most successful presentations in a wide variety of conditions is a small jig on a light line. When you put those three factors together, location, behavior, and presentation, odds are you're going to have more success catching springtime crappies.
Spring is a time when there is often fast fishing. For a lot of anglers, that's the only time they go crappie fishing. However, crappies can be caught in summer months. In the next part of this video, we'll show you the secrets of catching crappies in their summertime deep water locations.
You know it's summer when the day starts hot and just gets hotter. That's when a lot of anglers give up on crappie fishing. In most lakes and reservoirs, crappies have moved from shallow water springtime locations to deeper water summertime locations. Usually, you'll find crappies near some kind of structure, such as a weed line, rock pile, submerged timber, or sharply breaking bottom. Sometimes you'll find a school of crappies suspended in open water. Often they will be 10 to 20 feet deep. During the summer, crappies have frequent feeding periods. However, weather changes like a cold front can make the crappies much less active. Minnows, shad, and other small fish are usually the crappie's main food source in the summer. So you'll be using many of the same jigs, lures, and live bait rigs you used in the spring. Now let's get ready to go out and catch some summertime slabs on a big reservoir. Start by thinking about location. A big body of water can be intimidating. Where do you start to find the crappies? Local bait and tackle shops can give you some good ideas where to start. Begin by picking out specific sections of the lake to study and fish, like a creek channel feeding into the main lake. A good map can help you find potential crappie hotspots. Crappies use locations where shallow water is close to deep water. For example, a submerged point next to the main river channel, or a long ledge where the bottom drops off from shallow to deep. Fish for crappies on the downstream side of any structure. Crappies use the structure as shelter so they don't have to swim in the current. On a big reservoir, crappies may be in locations a long distance from shore. A good map will show you the location of navigational buoys that mark the main channel. Look for the buoys that are close to the locations you want to fish. Once you find the area you want to fish, focus your attention on the depth finder. You're looking for underwater features that attract summertime crappies. Things like quick changes in depth, submerged trees and stumps. Most important of all, you're looking for crappies. When you find a location that has cover and fish, drop a marker buoy. The marker gives you a visual reference point and helps you stay on the location and the fish. If you're working along a ledge or point, drop another marker and fish between the two buoys. In this kind of location, you may want to use a tightline rig. A tightline rig has a heavy sinker at the end of the line, 2 hooks on spreaders, and a barrel swivel that connects the rig to your fishing line. Here's how you tie a tightline rig. First, thread a few inches of line through a 3/4 ounce to 1 ounce sinker. Tie a small overhand knot in the end of the line to keep the knot from slipping, and tie on the sinker with a clinch knot. Then, about 18 inches from the sinker, make a loop of line several inches long. Make a basic overhand knot with the loop. Then put the loop through your knot one more time and pull it snug. Now you have a spreader that keeps the hook out and away from the line. For hooks, you use 2/0 to 4/0 light wire Aberdeen hooks. You put on a hook by threading the loop through the eye of the hook and putting the loop over the hook. Tie the second spreader loop about 18 inches above the first spreader, put on another hook, and you have a finished tightline rig. A tightline rig lets you fish for crappies in deep water, where there may be current and a lot of heavy cover. You can use a tightline rig on any kind of rod, but most anglers use a long light rod with a spinning or spin cast reel filled with 20 to 30 pound test line. Check your state and local fishing regulations to make sure a multiple hook rig like this is permitted on the waters you fish. A tightline rig lets you fish right over a school of crappies, but you should try to stay quiet. Don't run your outboard motor and try not to make any clunking noises in the boat. Loud noises can make the crappies stop feeding or even spook them out of a location. A tightline rig does several important things. A heavy sinker keeps your bait, usually a minnow, down near the bottom and in the cover. That's where the crappies are. The sinker also keeps your line tight so you can feel the faint tap of a crappie strike, especially if you hold your finger on the line. The purpose of having 2 hooks is not to catch 2 fish at once, but to help you find the depth crappies are feeding at. Sometimes crappies feed down near the bottom. Other times crappies feed a few feet up from the bottom. They may not move more than a few inches to go after a bait, so having bait at 2 different levels increases your odds of catching fish. The tightline rig helps you fish in submerged cover. When you do get snagged, and you will, you simply bounce the rig up and down, and the sinker pulls the hook out of the snag. Sometimes the light wire hooks bend and pull free from the snag. You can just bend the hook back in shape or slip it off and put on a new one. But most important, a tightline rig on a long rod helps you find crappie holding cover and stay in that cover. With a little practice, you can actually feel what your sinker is bumping into. Just hop the rig up and down a couple of inches as you drift or slowly troll along. There is a difference between the feel of your sinker falling into soft mud, brushing up against branches, or tapping onto a hard stump or log. When crappies are hanging tight to cover, you want your bait to be right up against a tree or right in the branches. That's how you put more fish in the boat. On a big body of water, finding the right spot to fish for crappies can be a real challenge. Use the depth finder to make sure you're over fish or good fish holding cover. The markers you put out will help you stay on the spot you want to fish. Work the area slowly and thoroughly. By learning to fish a tightline rig, you'll increase your odds of consistently catching crappies. We've shown you that crappies don't just disappear in the summer. By using the formula for success, you can find some great summertime slab fishing in reservoirs. And if you want to fish natural lakes in the summer, you'll learn how to do it in the next part of this program. In natural lakes, as in reservoirs, crappies use deeper water in the summer than the spring. Often you'll fish for them 10 to 20 feet below the surface. In natural lakes, look for crappies in 3 key locations: up in the weeds, suspended a ways out from the base of the weed line, and suspended over deep rock piles or places where the bottom drops off, also known as a break line. Before you start fishing, spend some time getting to know the lake. Scout the weeds, the weed line, and the break line with your depth finder. Cruise the shoreline area of the lake with a zigzag pattern. In natural lakes, crappies are often found in weeds with broad, curly leaves, commonly known as cabbage or pond weed. As you run the boat in from deeper water, you'll notice that the weeds start growing at a certain depth. That's the weed line. The weed line is the point where light levels are just sufficient for plant growth. Crappies and many other species of game fish are often in locations close to the weed line. Once you start finding fish, keep on scouting for a while to establish a pattern. What depth are the crappies using? Are they bunched up in big schools or scattered in little schools? The pattern you find will help you decide which presentation to use. Let's say you've marked a big school of crappies off the weed line on a large point. You could use a jig or a small crankbait to fish for those crappies. In either case, you could use the countdown method to fish the lure without a bobber. Cast to where you expect the crappies to be. As the lure sinks, count slowly. 1, 2, 3, and then start retrieving. Use a slow, steady retrieve. Keep the slack out of your line so you can feel the faint tap of a crappie taking your lure. Make several casts in the area, always counting down to the same depth before you start retrieving. Then, count a little higher to let the lure fall deeper. Eventually, you'll find the depth crappies are feeding at. Then you can keep on counting down your lure to the same depth. If you can stay right over the crappies, vertical jigging is a very effective technique. Use a 1/16 or 1/32 ounce jig. Sometimes you'll get more strikes if you hook a minnow on the jig. Use your height plus the length of the rod to quickly and easily judge how deep you will let the jig fall. Let the jig fall to the depth at which you found the crappies on the depth finder. Jig it slowly up and down at that depth. Lower the rod tip at the same speed the jig falls so you don't get slack in your line. Watch the line closely. Sometimes a slight twitch in the line is the only strike signal you get that a crappie has taken your lure. If you're not finding schools of fish in open water, you may want to spend some time searching the weeds for crappies. A small crappie spinner is good for this kind of location. Cast it right into the cabbage weeds. For the best action, retrieve the spinner slowly over the tops of the weeds, then let it drop down into the weeds. Cast out again to a different spot in the weeds. Retrieve and drop. Keep the slack out of your line because crappies will often strike as the lure is falling. Sometimes you'll see a school of fish suspended over deep water, not relating to any apparent cover. They could be crappies. Maneuver your boat to stay close to the crappies. Toss out a marker buoy to identify the spot. Drop the marker after you've passed over the school. Don't drop your anchor down through the fish because that could spook them. Use a simple presentation, a minnow on a hook with a small sinker about 6 inches up from the hook. Let the bait drop slowly down into the school of crappies. When you catch a crappie, you want to be able to get your lure or bait back down to where you caught the fish because there are probably more crappies at that depth. Crappies suspended over deep water are usually not feeding actively. They're tough to catch. And sometimes staying over a moving school of fish can be difficult. But with the formula for success and a little patience and concentration, you can master the challenge of summertime crappie fishing. Crappie fishing is one of the best ways to get your whole family into fishing. And one of the easiest ways to have a family fishing trip for crappies is to simply cruise the lake and drift with the wind. As you cruise the near shoreline areas, you want to stay a few yards outside the weed line. That's where you're most likely to find schools of crappies. Have as many lines out as you can. The number you can use will vary from state to state. You want to find out what the crappies are biting on and at what depth they're feeding. So put a different bait or lure on each line. And if you're using bobbers or corks, set them at different depths. When you catch one crappie, there are probably more in the location. Drop the anchor and concentrate on that spot for a while. Of course, half the fun of crappie fishing is cooking and eating crappies. But many people think that crappies get soft and mushy in the heat of summer. The truth is, crappies are good for eating any time of year. Put your catch on ice. For best results, you may even want to partially clean the crappies before icing them down. Summer is a good time to introduce kids to the fun and excitement of fishing. But remember, it may be harder to find crappies in the summer than in the spring. So be prepared. Take along plenty of snacks and other things to do. And don't get frustrated if their attention wanders. And remember, when you're out in the bright summer sun, use a good sunblock or sunscreen lotion. If you make those first few fishing trips a good experience, you're going to have a fishing buddy for life. And you'll have the satisfaction of introducing your kids to an activity they can enjoy the rest of their lives. Later in the day, as the sun goes down and the light levels get lower, crappies may start feeding at or just below the surface. That's when you might want to try fly fishing for crappies. You need only a few simple flies to catch crappies, and a light fly rod lets even small fish put up a good fight. Fly fishing, as well as any other kind of crappie fishing, is a great way to relax at the end of a hot summer day. You've seen that crappies don't just disappear in the heat of summer. To catch summertime slabs, you need to search the deeper waters to find good crappie locations. You need to pick baits and lures that can be worked slowly to match the crappie's feeding behavior. And you need the patience to work your presentation thoroughly through an area. Catching crappies in the summer is more challenging than springtime crappie fishing. But when you learn to catch crappies consistently in the summer, you'll be ready to go fishing for crappies any time of year.
Now you know the formula for success in catching crappies. There's location, which varies from season to season. There's behavior, including the types of food that crappies eat and how they respond to weather and water conditions. And finally, there's presentation, the kinds of lures, baits, and techniques that catch crappies. When you put these elements together, you're going to have more success. In fact, this very formula will make you a smarter angler no matter what species of fish you pursue. I hope you realize that as we get to be smarter and more successful anglers, we need to be wiser too. Crappies and other game fish are not an inexhaustible resource. And all fishermen need to think more about the fun of fishing, not just the number of fish brought home. And we need to protect and preserve our fisheries, particularly for future generations of crappie anglers. But please keep that in mind, especially when the formula is working very well for you. Thanks for watching this 3M Field & Stream video library presentation, and good fishing.
This video presentation is sponsored in part by Evinrude Outboards. Evinrude owners are born, not made.
The nice thing about having one of our small outboards is that you don't have to think small.
And by Sea Nymph Boats. For premium-grade, high-temper aluminum fishing and pontoon boats that are built to last, go Sea Nymph and catch the best. Also sponsored by Johnson Outboards. You can't beat the experience.
Johnson Outboards. Don't you wish everything was as dependable?
And by Low Boats. If you're looking for a high-quality aluminum John, V-hull, bass boat, or pontoon, you'll find it with Low. Quality boats from 3 generations of experience. Evinrude, Sea Nymph, Johnson, and Low are all OMC companies. OMC, we take the world boating.
The largemouth bass. If you want to tackle the hard-hitting action of America's favorite game fish, the 3M Sportsman's Video Collection has a complete series of original programs that'll make you the best bass angler on your water. There's Big Mouth, a classic film that puts you in the bass's world. Years in the making, edited from miles of incredible underwater footage. You'll see the secrets of bass behavior and why they're so challenging and exciting to catch. Nobody understands big bass better than Doug Hannon, the Bass Professor. In the Hannon Big Bass videos, you'll learn the newest, most innovative ideas about finding and catching bass. Through amazing underwater photography, you'll see how bass detect and strike lures. You'll learn to recognize the locations that hold big bass. And when you're ready to tie into one of these lunkers, Doug will show you his complete system for going after really big bass. The special lures, the necessary equipment and skills. Doug prepares you to catch the bass of a lifetime. For a look at bass fishing from top to bottom, spend a day on the water with championship fisherman Ricky Clunn. Ricky will show you how to find bass fast in unfamiliar waters and catch them with all the top techniques, from worm fishing to flipping. When you understand the whys behind the sport, the how-tos make a lot more sense. That's the secret of our trail-breaking Bass Mastery series with Al Lindner. Al shows you the basic principles behind his ability to catch more and bigger bass. With Al's formula for success, you'll be able to locate the bass hotspots, know what the fish are doing, and then select the right presentation. You'll catch more bass more consistently under a wide range of conditions. In the active spring period, Al shows you how to deal with the rapidly changing conditions of spring as the bass go through pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn patterns. It's the fast and efficient way to springtime fishing excitement. You can beat the dog days of July and August and still catch bass when few other anglers know what to do. Weather changes, human pressure, the effects of light and shade. You'll be able to master them all when you learn Al's surefire strategies for summer. In the Trophy Bass of Fall, Al shows you how to find those tight groups of really big cold water bass. Discover why fall conditions offer the best opportunity to land a trophy. The Bass Mastery programs. No other videos do more to develop all your angling skills. How to interpret local conditions, how to find bass, and how to pick the right lures. 3M Bass Fishing videos. We're the best at making you better. And if you love fishing, hunting, and other sports, think of 3M as your total video resource for outdoor adventure. The gentle beauty of a deep forest glade. The heart-pounding excitement of a trophy buck in rut. Going one-on-one with North America's most popular big game animal. That's what deer hunting's all about. And nobody brings you more in-depth information than true life action than the 3M Sportsman's Video Collection. The excitement of calling a bird into your gun. The satisfaction of making a clean shot. And the companionship of a well-trained dog. If you like the challenge of upland game bird and waterfowl hunting, 3M Sportsman's Video Collection gives you the thrill of being there and the knowledge you need to master the sport. If it's excitement you're after, come fishing with the experts from 3M Scientific Anglers and learn ways to catch more and bigger trout on the fly. You'll learn where to find trout in a stream and ways to present the right fly with the perfect cast so you can catch the most elusive trout during hatch and non-hatch situations. Plus, there's steelheading for 20-pound rainbows or going for the ultimate saltwater challenge. Let 3M Scientific Anglers bring home the excitement while you learn a lifetime of mastery techniques that will help you become the best fly fisherman you can be.